Well, this gospel shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. We're so familiar with that passage. It's been the vital force of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, starting with just a handful, when there was that time when we had about 3,500 people. That must have seemed very amazing and impossible humanly to get the gospel all over the world. Most of the people were poor, a few were well-to-do, but to get the message all over the world, well, it's still an impossible. Humanly, you know, let's look at the text in Mark again. Mark 16, the last chapter of the Gospel of Mark. And here was Jesus with 11 disciples. Sadly, one was missing. Who was it? There must have been some sadness as they met. And here's Jesus, and they're together. And Jesus is giving a final testimony to these 11 apostles. Just 11 people. And then these words in verse 15. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world. Now, 11 men. Go ye into all the world. 11 men. Enough to almost laugh, wasn't it? If you didn't have Jesus to say it. And it goes on to say, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. It's the only place where it tells us every individual will hear the gospel. There's going to be some miracles there. But we're told that the angels are going to join with us. They know where everyone is, or God knows, and get there. Oh, I tell you, some of the people. But the gospel doesn't end until everyone has had an opportunity. Wonderful thing, because if you go down, of course, Jesus was taken up to heaven in a few verses to heaven. I wondered what those 11 talked about when he vanished from their side. Go to all the world. Has the gospel gone to every nation, kindred, tongue and people? Certainly not to every individual. But it's amazing where it has gone to over the world. And the places where it went to, I've mentioned this years ago, the places where Christianity had gotten to. You're familiar, I'm sure, with that great mountain in New Mexico, the state of Mexico. And where right up the top of that is this inscription in an ancient writing, chiseled out. And professors of antiquity couldn't decipher what language. They knew it was an old language. And but eventually, one professor, when he looked at it, that's the ancient Phoenician language. And he started to find it and get other scholars over in Europe, and I suppose at Lebanon, because Phoenicia is Lebanon today. They've probably got scholars there too, but anyway, scholars went there when they knew what the language was, ancient Phoenician. But how did the Phoenicians get there? We know that they were the sailors of the sea in antiquity, great sailors. But that mountain's about 300 miles from the ocean. That's a long way to walk if you came there, even if you had an animal on the ship or whatever. They had to get there somewhere. And the amount, and there were all sorts of things, but included was the 10 Commandments concentrated, not full statements, but all the 10 Commandments. It's stumped to this day how that happened. But they they know that physicians that did it to get to that place. There's at least a book, I think it's more than one book on it. And there's no question about the situation. How did they get there? Only by boat. They didn't have an aeroplane or something like that, or a rocket coming from some place to another place. And think of to what I saw in Guatemala. I saw this with my own eyes when I was conducting Lincoln Steed's marriage to a Guatemalan as his wife. And it was the time when Elder Falkenberg was the Union President of Central America. And I met him there for the first time, and we got talking. And he said, are you going to look around? Oh, I'd like to, but we got no way of getting around. Well, he said, if you were willing to pay the petrol, I'll fly you over to Tikal. Have you heard of Tikal? It's on the eastern side of, eastern side of Guatemala. A great civilization was found there in the 18th, 19th century, and just covered by jungle, and these great big towers and images and all sorts of things in there. When they found it, they knew it was a civilization that seemed to have, for some reason, left it. And so he flew us over. I was fascinated by it. They have kept some of the towers just like they were found. And here were trees growing out of the sides of these towers. Others were cleaned up as close as they probably would have looked like when they left about the 10th or 12th, 10th and 11th of the century. So going back nearly, not a million, but large numbers. And we had someone going around with us, a guide, a lady guide. And we came to a monument about 5 foot high. and there was graved a face in it. And the guide said, "Where did this man come from?" Well, a number of us said, "That's a Chinese face." What were they doing over in Central America? How did they get there? But more than that, when they discovered this place, there was a lot of evidence of China. Jade, for example. There's no jade in the Americas, naturally, but you get it from China. They're certain that the Chinese got there simply by what they saw. And how did they get around? And yet we're told the gospel had gone to the world. And going back several times, when I was in Fiji, that's a pretty far away from the civilization of Europe and Asia and even Northern Africa and those places. And two men both told me, before white people came as missionaries there, that they were keeping the Sabbath. The Sabbath, not a Sabbath. Or just after the Second World War, a young couple, ordained at that point, Lester Hawkes. He was a young pastor soon after the end of the Second World War, and they were appointed to Papua, the southern part of Papua New Guinea, which is the flatter part in the south, and not the mountainous and rough up in the north of New Guinea. And while they were ministering in Papua, they found two tribes. Well, no, they didn't say tribes, but they were ones who, well, they were tribes, I suppose, but they were in their own area. Different tribes. And both of them would not do any work on the seventh day of the week. In Papua New Guinea, it was hardly civilized at that time. Two villages. They didn't know why. They said it was the customs at their places. And they didn't do any work on it. It was just a rest day. And it wasn't a seventh day, it was the seventh day. It's amazing how those things happen. So we've got to expect some of these things. I'm sure there's going to be very difficult places there. God miraculously, well, it seems miraculously, got the gospel. They said it went to all the world. I used to think the then known world, but it got way beyond what we would expect it to be. All right. Well, I've made quite a number of trips to Africa, different parts. I haven't been further north than Nigeria and Ghana and up that way. I haven't been up, well, I've been at Egypt, but I've not been at the major Muslim areas, and some of them, they're not open. So this year, one of our graduates, Lahaho, from Botswana, doing a great work back in Africa. And he said, come over and preach again back in Africa. And so I took one of the South African students, Simdamisi Potswa, from South Africa. Powerful preacher. He's doing his internship now. He'll graduate at the end of this school year. And he travelled with me. And our first place we went to was Malawi. Yes, and I'd been there once before, and I knew very well Pastor Kambili, who was a Malian, and I'd travelled with him 3 times, I think, in the past. A very strong, faithful Adventist pastor, and he doesn't only stay in Malawi, he gets down to Mozambique and over to Zambia and a few other countries like that, and doing a strong work, although I didn't see a lot of him this time. The invitation I got was from a group of doctors, Seventh-day Adventist doctors in Blantyre, the largest city in Malawi. It's not the capital. It's 2.5 to 3 million people in Blantyre. Lilongwe is the capital. It's about 1.5 million people, the second size. And I didn't get to Lilongwe this time, but I was kept there by these doctors and the students. I was amazed the number of these Adventist Malian that they were so wonderfully training the doctors and other nurses, although the university they were going to in Blantyre did not have a nursing school. They were up at the capital. And but there were pharmacists and allied health as well as training the doctors. They had a big faculty of, and here were 5 at this spot, these very faithful doctors. 5 of them were very strong, and the reason they wanted us to come up there, because they determined to get into the health message, in the lifestyle, instead of what they're doing. I stayed with one of the families where the husband was there. There was another family, both husband and wife were doctors, and there was another lady doctor, and there were all together at that spot 5 of them doctors, 2 lady doctors and 3 male doctors. All of them determined to get into lifestyle. They even have a plan. I mean, they've made out for it. And so they wanted to know, can you find people in America to help us so we do it the right way? These doctors were saying. They were very strong on it. They said, we don't want the money. We want to do the good work that God wants us to do. And I've talked with one of the doctors, Dr. Kelly, John Kelly. Some of you might know him. Yeah. Who does? Yeah. Oh, yes. You know Dr. Kelly. He's a very strong lifestyle specialist, and he's trying to get a group together to go over early next year to give them a month or 2 to give them a crash course. But they're very kind, and these doctors were Very nice young people. Well, we had our meetings there at the start at Blantyre, the University of Medicine, secular, of course. And as happens in Africa, virtually whenever I go there, most of my meetings are in universities, secular, because they give free of charge to the students for any lectures or that they want, and so you have these big classrooms going up, so you can get a lot there. Well, it was not the best time to be there because we're only a couple of weeks before the final exams for the year, but still every night we were getting 80 or more students go. Virtually everyone an Adventist. I don't think there wasn't one. May have been one or two, but they kept coming, and a lot of them were the students of that university, and so many of them were doing medicine. Others were doing other forms of allied health and so on. There was one of the doctors, lady doctors, her husband was a pharmacist. And he said, I'm just ready to go into lifestyle medicine. I know what needs to be done to replace the pharmacies that we've got. And that would be a very knowledgeable issue to do. And a wonderful situation. Well, then the next Sabbath, though, another university called of Technology, University of Technology, on the outskirts also of Blantyre, but up the north part of Blantyre of the city. And that day, a special day. It was special for all the students that were there for a special speaker and event and so on. And there were over 140 of these Adventist students there. Well, I was not interested too much to go there because all the ones, the doctors and that I had met, every one said we've only got one faithful pastor, denominational pastor, except for Pastor Cambilli, who is in self-supporting work now, and only one that is faithful. I've found the students, wherever I went in Africa, they were alert and they were faithful. They seemed the backbone of the reforms, these young people. Well, anyway, we went to this technology, and there are about 140 people there, some doctors and a few other people, but overwhelmingly they were students at the university. Well, they went on the platform, the pastor that was going to speak. I was very, really uninterested, simply because everyone had told me every pastor was teaching error. But this pastor, he started to speak. He started off pretty well. So I pricked my ears up. But as he went on, it was more powerful and more wonderful message of salvation by faith and into character perfection. So I thought they must be telling me the wrong thing. Well, after the service, I was taken to a family to eat with them, and who should be where? This pastor that had preached. He was invited too. So we got into So I said how much I had greatly appreciated the message that he'd given. And yes, and that. But I said, I was told there was only one faithful pastor here. You're looking at him, he said. This was the one they were talking to me about. He said, it's terrible here. He said, the only way that I get by is because I'm getting so many converts, baptisms. But he's on the outside of the conference leaders and so on. But what a man to stand. You know, it's hard it's hard to stand in the desert alone, but in the crowd it's much harder, isn't it? When you get into a crowd and everyone else has a different... Well, some of you have had to stand for that, and others have done to it, and many of the pastors of the past and so on. And so here was this wonderful situation there. And then I was taken up, right up in the north to Malamulu. Anyone remember that name? Malamalu. I might have the pronunciation just a bit wrong, but I remember it when I was a boy, in missionary reports, when it was Nyasaland Protectorate, before it was independent. Nyasaland, yes, Protectorate. And so I was interested to see it. And it was a huge drive, because the potholes were terrible in the road. Many times you were down to 15 miles an hour or something like that. And but when we got there, huge university. They had 400 nursing students, and it was mainly in medical areas, but a huge hospital. And so we went around to look at it and see what was going on. And eventually we ran into a doctor, a lady doctor, an American white, and she actually came from West Virginia. And very nice woman, probably mid-30s, something like that. And so we got talking to her, and she'd been there 5 years, and she was planning to stay 2 more years there. And she said she'd been fulfilled in many ways, and that, but there were some issues that were coming. And then a man, another American man, a black American man. So he was the administrator of it. And I asked him, he'd been there 2 years, but he's planning to stay longer. And I said, well, where do you come from, the States? Washington, D.C. So not far from us. So it was interesting. But there was a sadness. And we were there. We were asking questions. And one of the locals said to us, we're very sad. For many years we had a vegan diet. Way back to the early part of the 20th century. But eventually the students revolted on us. They had a student body of 2,000 something, big, relatively for an Adventist institution. Well, I said, what did they rebel against? Well, they rose up demanding flesh food, because when we go visiting our faculty, they're eating meat. We're the ones that are penalised. Sad, isn't it? They take the students to their homes and feed them flesh. But in the cafeteria or in their rooms, they couldn't use any flesh, you see. I tell you, Satan gets his head in the door. If we're not vigilant, those kind of things happen. So very sad indeed. And so, yet to see the faithful people, there was, it seems to be all over the world. There are lay people that are standing firm. So there are pastors too. It's not just lay people. But it's hard for them. It's not the way it's happening, the normal things are doing in that place. And I said, look, you've got to do everything to keep full reformation in this place. To see such lovely young people there was inspiring. And I'm looking forward, if they get into this lifestyle, it's going to be good. For example, the last night of the meetings back in Blantyre, suddenly my eyes focused on a young lady in the first row. I hadn't noticed her before. She was only slightly small, looked very young. I would have said 19 or at the most. And I looked at that young lady, had such a wonderful face. I'm talking about not a Christian. She looked so Christian, this girl. It was in her face. She was beaming, that kind of thing that happens. And so I thought, look, I want to talk to this young lady and see if she'll be interested, because she was a medical student, so I knew she must be maybe first year or something like that. And was she interested in lifestyle medicine? Well, would you believe it? When she came up, she was the first person to come to me after the sermon. God arranged it. And so I asked her, was she doing medicine? Yes. What year are you in? I've just finished fourth year. I couldn't believe it. She didn't look that old. And so she said, I will be graduating next year. I've got the fifth year is a full practicum for the medical doctors. And so I said, would you have any interest in lifestyle? Oh, I'd love to get into that. I don't want to go through the allopathic. I'm learning it, but I want to get into it. So I told a couple of the doctors, get hold of this girl and make sure you keep close to her and train what you're going to do. And it's medicine in Malawi is not good. All the doctors told me, we got so many people dying that could be saved if we could get them to hospitals or get them to good hospitals, or if we had enough doctors in the country. So it's a wonderful country to get into the lifestyle situation, where they can get there and with a much cheaper thing than getting into a hospital, and with much better treatment in many areas you can imagine. So I was so blessed by being there. And but then we went down to Botswana, and that was at the University of Garibani, the capital city, and a beautiful university. Of all the African countries I've been to, Botswana is the most modernized. Do you know where Botswana is? You do, yes, but all of you know? It's just above South Africa. And it's only got a small population, just over 2 million people. Gaborone is a city of about 900,000 people. If you go there, you'll go to wonderful shoppings, and that you would think you were in the middle of London or the middle of Washington, or tremendous quality. Of course, per population, it's the most prosperous of the nations of the whole of Africa, because they are the greatest sellers of diamonds today. And they have a president. Every single person I spoke to, some that were not Adventists and the Adventists, everyone spoke so good about this president, because unlike many of the other countries where they had a lot of money or minerals and so on, this man didn't take it to himself. He put it in to the country to establish it. Well, by the way, his mother came from England, so he was half English ethnically and Botswanan from his father. And I thought they might be a little worried about not having a full Botswana, but no, they didn't worry about that, simply because they felt that it was so wonderful how he was bringing up the people, building wonderful hospitals, real hospitals, even out in the country areas, and building up better roads all over the place. It's one of the most prosperous of Africa I've ever seen. And but there we were again in the university, and here we had more Adventists training at that university. And again, the quality of the young people. You know, it's a wonderful thing to get a group of between somewhere 80 or I've had them up to in South Africa to over 200 people coming there, and once or twice it was much even bigger than that. Unfortunately, I couldn't get much in South Africa. They're right in the middle of final exams. But we did have a group in University of Pretoria, and also the university also in Pretoria that was called the Mechanical University, University of the Mechanicals. And we had meetings there. We got more there than we could get in Pretoria. In the past we've gotten up to 200 and so there of Adventists. But I've always been struck by the sincerity of these African students. Probably the best groups I've seen over a period of time of any Adventist universities. Certainly much better than I saw in Australia, going to universities there, the Adventists. or in sometimes where we've been in other parts of the continents. God is looking for that generation. They'll be intelligent because they'll have the mind of Jesus to take the gospel to the world. I for the first time, preached in Zulu land. That's, of course, in South Africa, the Republic of South Africa. And as you know from your history, 150 years ago, the Zulus were fiercely dangerous to the British colonizing. Many were killed by the Zulus. The British were fearful of these warriors. But what a wonderful thing to be preaching right in the center of Zulu land and these warriors for Christ. I told them, first time I'd been there, I said, I'm glad I didn't come over here 150 years ago. But here they were warriors, and they still had the sword, but the sword of the gospel. And, oh, I tell you, we had a wonderful time with those Zulus. They're warriors today, but the right kind of warriors, you see. So it's what God can do. And right down the south we went, and another university down in, big city, not Cape Town, but over the other side from Cape Town in the south. And that was a wonderful experience too with those young. What's that? No. That's further up, much lower than. Well, you go down on the east coast from Durban, way down on the coast from Durban. Any case, here again was a body of wonderful young people. I can always decide that most of the people that I go to in Africa are young people. I'd love to get a whole bunch of them in a huge number to train them at heart. They do a great job. These are really excellent young people. Not that we don't have from all over the world, but it's more concentrated there in most countries where Adventism is. But brethren and sisters, it's hard here in Britain in many ways, secular in many. It's not an easy country. And I sense too, it's getting much harder in Australia too. Used to be more open, but God's going to bring everyone. They'll have the opportunity, and we've got to go. If it's easy or hard is not the issue. We have to preach the word, teach the word, and call people to the kingdom of heaven. And who God will do, we're going to have fruit for the kingdom. God bless you all. And thank you for the privilege of being here again on this 25th anniversary. And I hope that the work of God will go and expand and expand. And there'll be a great harvest from Great Britain, as I hope in every country of the world. Let us kneel. Dear Father in heaven, we are at the end of this world's history. It's growing old like a garment. And yet there is a huge population around the world, most of whom have never heard the everlasting gospel. It will take a miracle from you for us to get to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, and to every one on the planet. Oh Lord, give us the Holy Spirit. May we be ready to receive it. May we have the character that will be necessary to receive the latter rain. And we know that when the latter rain falls, miracles that we could never have understood before will take place. And in a very short time, the everlasting gospel will get to every creature upon this planet. Oh Lord, this is a time for each one of us to rise up, put all our concentration and our dedication for the coming of Jesus. Amen. Amen.